The massive council chamber floated in the darkness of space, orbiting a neutral world that no species could claim as their own. Inside, 12 representatives from the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy sat in a perfect circle. Each one believed they represented the peak of evolution, the finest examples of what intelligent life could achieve. They had ruled the stars for thousands of years, maintaining peace through diplomacy and the occasional show of force. Today they would deliver a message to the newest species that had dared to reach for the stars. Daesung stood in the center of the circle, his simple gray suit looking plain compared to the elaborate forms surrounding him. Some of the council members were tall and crystalline, others were covered in scales or fur, and a few existed as clouds of gas held together by energy fields. He had been Earth's ambassador for 3 years now, patiently explaining humanity's desire to join the galactic community. 3 years of meetings, presentations, and careful negotiations. Today, he would finally receive their answer. The council leader, Thexal, rose from his seat. His crystalline body caught the light from distant stars and scattered it across the chamber in rainbow patterns. When he spoke, his voice resonated through translation devices that converted his thoughts into sounds every species could understand. Ambassador Daesung, we have carefully considered Earth's application to join the Galactic Council. We have studied your history, your technology, and your culture. After much deliberation, we have reached our decision. Daesung felt his heart beat faster but kept his expression neutral. This was the moment humanity had been waiting for, the chance to stand among the stars as equals, to learn from civilizations that had been traveling space before humans had even discovered fire. Your application is denied. The words hit Daesung like a physical blow, but he remained standing. Around the circle, he could see several council members nodding in agreement with the decision. A few looked uncomfortable, but none spoke up. Thexal continued, his voice carrying no emotion, just cold logic. Humanity is too young, too violent, too chaotic. Your history is filled with wars fought over resources, ideas, and territory. You make decisions based on emotions rather than logic. You refuse to abandon your primitive concepts of individuality and nationalism. These traits make you unsuitable for membership in our community. Daesung took a deep breath. With respect, Council Leader, every species has a violent past. The difference is that we acknowledge ours and learn from it. We came here in peace, seeking friendship and knowledge. A large reptilian being, representative of the Vrin Empire, hissed with what might have been laughter. Peace? Your planet has over 200 different nations, each with its own military. You have enough nuclear weapons to destroy your world several times over. This is not peace. This is barely controlled chaos. That is our strength, Daesung said firmly. We are diverse. We think differently. We solve problems in ways others might not consider. That diversity could benefit the Council. Thexal's crystalline form seemed to harden. There is more, Ambassador. The Council has decided that humanity poses a potential threat to galactic stability. Therefore, we are issuing an ultimatum. You will surrender all faster-than-light technology to Council custody within 72 hours. Your species will submit to what we call protective oversight. Council observers will be stationed on Earth to guide your development until such time as you prove yourselves ready for independence. The chamber fell silent. Daesung stared at the Council leader, unable to believe what he was hearing. You're asking us to become slaves. We are offering protection and guidance, Thexal corrected. Many younger species have benefited from such arrangements. In a few centuries, perhaps humanity will be ready to stand on its own. And if we refuse? The Vrin representative leaned forward, his massive form casting a shadow across the chamber floor. Then the Council will enforce compliance through military action. We have no desire for conflict, but we will not allow a dangerous species to threaten galactic peace. Daesung looked around the circle, seeing the same cold certainty on every alien face. They had already decided. This meeting was just a formality, a chance to deliver their demands before crushing any resistance. They saw humanity as primitive children playing with weapons they didn't understand. You're making a terrible mistake, Daesung said quietly. Humanity has survived ice ages that should have killed us. We've endured plagues that wiped out half our population and came back stronger. We've fought wars that devastated continents and rebuilt from the ashes. We've stared into the nuclear fire and stepped back from the edge. We are survivors. We don't know how to surrender. Several council members shifted uncomfortably at his words, but Thexal remained unmoved. That is precisely why you must be controlled. Your species' refusal to accept defeat, your stubborn persistence in the face of overwhelming odds, these are not virtues. They are dangerous instabilities that could destabilize the entire galaxy. The Council has spoken. You have 72 hours. Daesung bowed formally, more out of habit than respect. Then I will deliver your ultimatum to my government. But I want you to remember this moment. Remember that you forced this choice upon us. Whatever happens next is on you. He turned and walked toward the exit, his footsteps echoing in the silent chamber. Behind him he heard the Vryn representative laughing again. What can one primitive species possibly do against the combined might of 12 advanced civilizations? They will comply or be crushed. The journey back to Earth took 6 days at maximum speed. Daesung spent the entire trip composing his report, knowing that every word would be analyzed by Earth's leaders. When his ship finally entered orbit, he found a dozen military vessels waiting as escort. The news had already spread. Somehow, word of the Council's ultimatum had leaked and Earth was preparing for the worst. President Minji met him at the landing pad. She was a small woman with steel in her eyes and decades of political experience etched into her face. "Tell me everything," she said as they walked toward the secure briefing room. Daesung laid out the situation in detail. The Council's demands, the 72-hour deadline, the threat of military force. As he spoke, more officials filed into the room. Military generals, scientific advisors, intelligence officers, and representatives from major nations around the world. This decision would affect all of humanity, so all of humanity needed to be represented. The debate lasted for hours. Some argued for compliance, pointing out that humanity's technology was no match for species that had been traveling the stars for millennia. Better to submit now and work toward independence later. Others wanted to fight, refusing to hand over humanity's freedom without resistance. The arguments grew heated, voices rising as fear and anger mixed with determination and pride. Then the alarm sounded. General Taiyang burst into the room, his face pale. "Madam President, we have a situation. 3 colony ships heading to New Busan have been destroyed. The attack came from Vryn warships. Early reports indicate no survivors. 5,000 civilians are dead." The room fell silent. President Minji stood slowly, her hands flat on the table in front of her. When she spoke, her voice was cold and clear. They didn't even wait for the deadline. They attacked civilian ships without warning. That's not enforcement. That's murder. She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of every person present. "I won't force anyone to fight. Those who want to pursue diplomatic solutions are free to do so. But as for me, as for Earth, I will not surrender to murderers. We declared our independence from tyranny centuries ago and will do it again now. If the Galactic Council wants war, then war is what they'll get." The vote was unanimous. Within hours, every military base on Earth was activating reserves. Shipyards that had been building civilian transports retooled for warships. Scientists who had been researching peaceful applications of technology turned their genius toward weapons. And across the planet, millions of humans who had never agreed on anything suddenly found themselves united by a single purpose: survival. The Galactic Council had made their fatal miscalculation. They thought they were dealing with a primitive species that would fold under pressure. Instead, they had awakened something that had no equivalent in their orderly, logical galaxy. They had awakened humanity's will to fight, and that will had no limit, no boundary, and no off-switch. The war had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same. Commander Zenthor stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching Earth grow larger on the display screens. Behind his ship, the 5th Fleet of the Vryn Empire stretched out in perfect formation. 12 capital ships, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built. 40 cruisers bristling with weapons that could crack a planet's crust. 200 support vessels carrying troops, supplies, and repair equipment. It was enough firepower to conquer 10 primitive worlds. He had reviewed the intelligence reports on humanity during the 6-day journey. What he found confirmed his expectations. These humans had only discovered faster-than-light travel 5 years ago. Before that, they had been trapped on their single world, fighting endless wars against each other. Their weapons were crude chemical explosives and basic nuclear devices. Their ships were barely more than metal boxes with engines attached. They had no shields, no plasma weapons, no gravity manipulators. By every measure, they were centuries behind the Vryn. "This will be over quickly," Zenthor said to his second-in-command. "Once they see our fleet, they will surrender. Primitives always do." His officer nodded agreement. Should we prepare landing forces, Commander? Not yet. First, we show them their situation is hopeless. Then we accept their surrender. The Council wants this resolved with minimal casualties. We are here to enforce peace, not to massacre a species that simply doesn't know better. The fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of Earth's solar system. Zenthor expected immediate communication from the human government, perhaps begging for mercy, perhaps trying to negotiate better terms. Instead, there was only silence. Scan the system, Zenthor ordered. Where are their defensive ships? The sensor officer worked his controls, his scaled hands moving quickly across the displays. Commander, I'm detecting hundreds of small craft. They appear to be civilian vessels, mining ships, cargo haulers. They're scattered throughout the asteroid belt and around the outer planets. Zenthor frowned. Where is their military fleet? I'm not detecting any large warships, Commander. Just these small craft and some orbital defense platforms around Earth itself. Something felt wrong, but Zenthor couldn't identify what. Perhaps the humans had pulled their military forces back to defend their homeworld directly. That would be a logical choice for a primitive species. They would want to protect their population center. Move the fleet toward Earth, he ordered. Battle formation. Keep shields at full power. I want to be ready for anything. The Vryn fleet began its advance, moving at a steady pace that would bring them to Earth in 6 hours. Zenthor used the time to review the surrender terms he would offer. The Council had been clear. Humanity would give up all advanced technology, accept oversight, and submit to guidance. In return, they would be protected and eventually, if they proved themselves worthy, granted limited independence. 4 hours into the advance, the first attack came. It started with the civilian ships. Dozens of them suddenly changed course, accelerating toward the Vryn fleet at speeds that seemed suicidal. Zenthor watched in confusion as mining vessels and cargo haulers pushed their engines far beyond safe limits. Commander, those ships are carrying massive energy signatures. I think they're loaded with nuclear weapons. Before Zenthor could give orders, the first wave hit. The civilian ships didn't slow down. They didn't fire from a distance. They simply rammed directly into the Vryn vessels, detonating their nuclear payloads on impact. The Vryn shields were designed to deflect energy weapons and absorb plasma fire. They had never been tested against the raw kinetic force of a ship traveling at maximum speed, combined with multiple nuclear explosions at point-blank range. The shields held for a moment, then failed. 3 Vryn cruisers disappeared in brilliant flashes of light. Return fire, Zenthor shouted. Destroy those ships before they reach us. The Vryn fleet opened up with plasma cannons and missile batteries, space filled with deadly energy as they targeted the incoming civilian craft. But there were too many, and they were too spread out. For every ship the Vryn destroyed, 2 more got through. The humans weren't trying to win a traditional space battle. They were throwing everything they had at the enemy, using their own ships as weapons. Then the second wave attacked from behind. More small craft emerged from the asteroid belt where they had been hiding. These ones weren't loaded with nuclear weapons. They carried something else, something the Vryn scanners had trouble identifying. Zenthor soon learned what they were. The human ships fired what appeared to be solid metal projectiles. No energy signature, no guidance systems, just chunks of dense material accelerated to incredible speeds. The Vryn shields, already weakened by the nuclear attacks, couldn't stop the kinetic impacts. The projectiles punched through hulls like paper, causing explosive decompression and system failures. How are they doing this? Zenthor's officer shouted over the chaos. These are supposed to be primitives. A human pilot named Hyunwoo guided his cargo hauler through the battlefield. His ship was old, battered, and had been scheduled for retirement before the war started. Now it was packed with every explosive the military could fit inside. His hands were steady on the controls despite knowing what came next. He had volunteered for this mission 6 hours ago. When the military asked for pilots willing to make one-way trips, thousands had stepped forward. Hyunwoo was selected because of his experience and his steady nerves, also because he had nothing left to lose. His wife and daughter had been on one of the colony ships the Vryn destroyed. 5,000 people murdered without warning, including the 2 people he loved most in the universe. The Vryn flagship loomed ahead, massive and terrible. Its weapons were tearing apart human ships all around him. But Hyunwoo's ship was small, fast, and already damaged enough that sensors might mistake it for debris. He pushed the throttle to maximum, feeling the engines scream in protest. A plasma bolt grazed his ship, tearing off the port stabilizer. The cargo hauler spun wildly and Hyunwoo fought to regain control. Another hit took out his communication array. He could no longer hear mission control, could no longer receive orders. It didn't matter. He knew what he had to do. The flagship's point defense systems finally noticed him, but it was too late. Hyunwoo aimed his ship directly at the massive engine array at the vessel's rear. In the last seconds, he activated the cargo bay door, letting vacuum pull the explosives toward the enemy ship even as he maintained his collision course. His final transmission went out on all frequencies, human and alien alike. His voice was calm, almost peaceful. "This is for the 5,000. This is for my wife and daughter. And this is for every human you ever thought you could push around." The cargo hauler hit the flagship's engines at full speed. The explosives detonated a fraction of a second later. The chain reaction was spectacular. The flagship's power core overloaded and the massive vessel broke apart, scattering debris across thousands of kilometers of space. Commander Zenthor found himself floating in an escape pod, watching his fleet retreat in disorder. Of the 200 ships he had brought to Earth, nearly 70 were destroyed or disabled. The survivors were pulling back, trying to regroup and make sense of what had just happened. He had fought in 17 campaigns across the galaxy. He had defeated pirate fleets, put down rebellions, and enforced council law on dozens of worlds. Never, not once, had he encountered an enemy that fought like this. The humans didn't follow standard tactics. They didn't worry about preserving their forces or maintaining supply lines. They just attacked with everything they had, using whatever weapons were available, even if it meant certain death. As his pod drifted toward a rescue ship, Zenthor reviewed the battle data. The numbers were clear. The humans had lost more ships than the Vryn. Their casualties were probably twice as high. By any military standard, this should have been a Vryn victory, but his fleet was retreating, and the humans were still fighting. Back on Earth, President Minji watched the battle from the command center deep beneath the planet's surface. When the Vryn fleet finally withdrew, a cheer went up from the assembled officers and staff. But Minji didn't celebrate. She looked at the casualty reports. 3,000 human pilots dead, most of them volunteers who had known they wouldn't be coming back. General Taeyang approached her, his expression grim despite the victory. "The Vryn will be back, Madam President, and next time they'll bring more ships." "I know," Minji said, "but we proved something today. We proved that advanced technology doesn't guarantee victory. We proved that humanity won't go down without a fight. And most importantly, we proved that they can bleed." She looked around the room at the men and women who had coordinated the defense. "Send out the order. Every shipyard, every factory, every laboratory starts working on war production. We need more ships, more weapons, more everything. This was just the first battle. The real war is coming." Far away in the Galactic Council chambers, Thexal watched the same battle footage that Zenthor had recorded. The other council members sat in shocked silence. They had expected the Vryn Fifth Fleet to sweep aside human resistance in hours. Instead, they had witnessed something that shouldn't have been possible. The Vryn representative, still confident despite the losses, addressed the council. "This was a minor setback. The humans got lucky with their primitive tactics. Next time we will be prepared." But Thexal wasn't so sure. He replayed the footage of the human ships ramming Vryn vessels, of pilots deliberately sacrificing themselves to take out larger enemy craft, of primitive nuclear weapons used with terrifying effectiveness. This wasn't luck. This was something else, something the council hadn't encountered before. It was determination without limit. It was a willingness to pay any price, make any sacrifice, endure any loss to achieve victory. The Galactic Council had ruled through superior technology and overwhelming force for thousands of years. They had forgotten that sometimes raw, stubborn refusal to surrender could be more powerful than any weapon. "Increase the military commitment," Thexal finally said. "Send 3 full battle fleets. This ends now before it gets worse." He didn't realize that it was already worse. The galaxy was about to learn a lesson that humanity had known for its entire existence. The most dangerous opponent isn't the one with the best weapons or the strongest army. It's the one who simply refuses to lose. News of the battle spread across council space faster than light itself. Within days, every member species had heard about the human victory over the Vryn Fifth Fleet. Reactions varied from species to species. Some dismissed it as luck. Others began asking questions, and a few started to worry. Velkara was a xenobiologist who worked for the Council's Science Division. She had been studying humanity since their first contact 3 years ago, fascinated by their unusual biology and social structures. Now, with war breaking out, her research took on new importance. The military wanted to know everything about humans. Their weaknesses, their limitations, anything that could be exploited. What Velkara discovered kept her awake for 3 nights straight. She started with human evolution. Tracing their development from primitive ancestors, humans had evolved as hunters on a world that seemed designed to kill them. They weren't the fastest, strongest, or most well-armed predators on their planet. But they had one advantage that made them terrifying. They could run forever. Velkara found footage of human hunters chasing prey across vast distances. The prey would sprint away at speeds humans couldn't match, but humans would just keep following. Hour after hour, never stopping, never giving up. Eventually, the prey would collapse from exhaustion, and the humans would simply walk up and finish the job. They called it persistence hunting. That same trait showed up everywhere in human history. When climate changed and food became scarce, other species went extinct. Humans adapted and survived. When diseases killed millions, they kept breeding, kept fighting, kept pushing forward. When they developed nuclear weapons capable of destroying their world, they came within minutes of ending everything, then somehow pulled back and continued existing. But biology was only part of the picture. Velkara dug deeper into human psychology and social structures. What she found disturbed her even more. Humans formed bonds with each other that went beyond simple pack behavior. They would die for complete strangers if those strangers belonged to their group. They would sacrifice themselves for ideas, for nations, for causes they believed in. They formed families not just through genetics but through choice and loyalty. And strangest of all, they could form these bonds with almost anything, including other species and even inanimate objects. Velkara documented cases of humans risking their lives to save animals. She found stories of human soldiers bonding with their weapons, naming them and treating them as companions. She read accounts of humans forming emotional attachments to their ships, their vehicles, even their homes. When something became part of a human circle, they would fight to defend it. With the same intensity they would fight to defend their own children. She compiled all her findings into a report and submitted it to the military command. The response came back within hours. Her conclusions were too alarming. They couldn't be accurate. She must have made errors in her research. Velkara sent the report again, this time directly to council members. "I am not wrong," she wrote in her summary. "We are not fighting soldiers. We are not fighting a military. We are fighting survivors who have been training for war since they climbed down from trees. They have spent their entire existence learning how to kill and how to endure. They turned their whole planet into a weapons testing ground, and now we have given them a reason to turn all that violence outward instead of inward." Most council members ignored her warnings. A few read the report and felt a chill run through their bodies. While the council debated strategy, humanity was preparing for the next attack. They knew more Vryn ships were coming. They knew the council wouldn't stop until humanity was defeated or destroyed. So they did what humans do best. They adapted. Every colony in human space became a fortress. Civilian populations were trained in basic combat. Children learned to handle weapons as soon as they were old enough to hold them. Underground bunkers were dug on every inhabited world. Supply caches were hidden across star systems. And humanity's military worked around the clock to develop new weapons and tactics. On the frontier colony of New Busan, a young woman named Jisoo organized the civilian defense force. She was 24 years old, trained as an agricultural engineer, and had never fired a weapon in her life before the war started. Now she commanded 40 civilians who had turned a peaceful farming settlement into a military strongpoint. She had studied human military history in her spare time, devouring accounts of guerrilla warfare, resistance movements, and asymmetric tactics. She learned about humans who had fought off invaders with improvised weapons. She read about soldiers who had held positions against impossible odds. And she learned that technology didn't matter as much as determination and clever thinking. When Vryn ships appeared in orbit and began landing troops, Jisoo was ready. She had her people hidden in tunnels they had dug beneath the settlement. The Vryn found empty buildings and assumed the colonists had fled. They were setting up a command post when the first improvised explosive detonated. Jisoo had learned how to make bombs from basic farming chemicals. Nothing fancy, nothing high-tech, just simple explosive devices triggered by timers or pressure plates. The kind of weapons humans had been using for centuries. They were crude and unreliable, but they worked well enough. The Vryn troops, trained for conventional warfare against enemies with similar technology, didn't know how to respond to this kind of fighting. They couldn't use their advanced sensors to detect bombs made from fertilizer and fuel. Their plasma weapons were useless against enemies who hid underground and attacked when least expected. Their shields protected them from energy weapons but did nothing against shrapnel from explosions. For 6 days, Jisu's 40 civilians held off 300 Vryn soldiers. They used hit-and-run tactics, emerging from tunnels to attack, and then disappearing before the enemy could respond. They set traps in buildings, poisoned water supplies, and generally made the Vryn occupation a nightmare. When military reinforcements finally arrived, the Vryn were desperate to retreat. Jisu was captured during the fighting. The Vryn commander interrogated her, trying to understand how a civilian with no military training had caused so much damage. "Why didn't you surrender?" he asked. "You couldn't win. You must have known that." Jisu looked at him with eyes that held no fear, only cold determination. "Because you came to our home. You tried to take what was ours. Every human knows that you fight for your home. You fight for your family. You fight for your freedom. We don't surrender those things. Ever." Her words were recorded and eventually spread across the galaxy. They became a symbol of human resistance. But they also became something else. They became a warning that the Council was too proud to hear. While the Council focused on attacking human colonies, Earth's military launched its own offensive. General Taiyang commanded the Third Fleet, a collection of ships that had been built quickly from whatever materials were available. They weren't pretty, and they weren't as advanced as Vryn vessels, but they were fast and they were numerous. Taiyang didn't try to fight the Council fleets directly. Instead, he targeted infrastructure. His ships struck at communication relays, destroying the Council's ability to coordinate their forces. They hit supply depots, forcing the enemy to stretch their logistics. They attacked trade routes, disrupting the economy that funded the war effort. "We can't beat them ship to ship," Taiyang explained to his officers. "So we don't try. We make them chase us across the galaxy. We make every military action cost them more than they can afford. We make them afraid to leave their bases because they don't know where we'll strike next. We turn their technological advantage into a disadvantage by refusing to fight on their terms." The strategy worked better than expected. Council fleets found themselves constantly reacting to human attacks instead of executing their own plans. Supply lines that had operated smoothly for centuries began to break down under the constant harassment. Ships that should have been fighting humans spent their time protecting cargo vessels and repair stations. And every day, humanity grew stronger. Shipyards that had taken years to build ships before the war now completed new vessels in weeks. Scientists who had been working on peaceful research turned their attention to weapons development. Every loss humanity suffered seemed to make them more determined rather than less. 6 months into the war, cracks began to appear in the Galactic Council. 4 member species withdrew their military forces, unwilling to continue taking casualties for what they increasingly saw as the Vryn Empire's war. Their economies were suffering from the disruption of trade routes. Their populations were growing tired of endless conflict. And, more importantly, they were starting to question whether humanity really posed a threat to galactic peace, or if the Council had simply made a terrible mistake. Ambassador Daesung, who had returned to Earth when the war started, sent a new message to the Council. His words were broadcast across all channels, both human and alien. "You can end this today. Recognize our sovereignty. Pay reparations for the 5,000 civilians you murdered in that first attack. Guarantee that you will never again try to enslave humanity. Do these things and we will consider peace. Refuse and we will continue fighting until either we win or you destroy every last one of us. The choice is yours." The Vryn Empire refused immediately. Pride wouldn't let them admit defeat or accept terms from a primitive species. The Council leader Thexal, despite growing doubts, continued to support them. He believed one decisive victory would break humanity's will to fight. He thought if they could just inflict enough casualties, make humans hurt badly enough, they would finally accept reality and surrender. He didn't understand that pain was something humans had been dealing with for their entire existence. Every species in the galaxy tried to avoid suffering. Humans seemed to thrive on it. They had stories about heroes who endured terrible hardships. They had religions based on sacrifice and redemption through pain. They had an entire philosophy around the idea that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Thexal ordered the military to prepare for a massive assault. 3 full battle fleets, the largest force the Council had ever assembled. They would strike at humanity's main military base outside Earth's solar system. They would inflict such devastating losses that humans would have no choice but to surrender. The order went out, and the fleets began to gather. Hundreds of ships from dozens of species all converging on a single target. It would be the decisive battle of the war. The Council was certain they would win, but certainty, humanity had learned long ago, was often just another word for dangerous assumption. Proxima Station hung in space like a small city, made of metal and composite materials. It was humanity's largest military base outside Earth's solar system, home to 40,000 soldiers and support personnel. The station served as a command center, repair facility, and staging area for operations across the frontier. If the Council wanted to break humanity's military capability, Proxima was the logical target. General Taeyang knew the attack was coming. Human intelligence had intercepted enough communications to understand the Council's plan. 800 ships were gathering for the assault. It was the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history. Against this overwhelming force, Taeyang had perhaps 100 defending vessels and the station's own weapon systems. The numbers said humanity should evacuate. The logical choice was to pull back, save the ships and personnel, and fight another day. But Taeyang understood something the Council did not. Sometimes battles weren't about winning. Sometimes they were about making the enemy pay such a terrible price that victory became meaningless. "We're staying," Taeyang announced to his staff. "We're going to make them regret ever coming here." For 6 months, humanity had been preparing for this moment. While the Council focused on hunting human ships and securing their supply lines, human engineers had been quietly mining the space around Proxima Station. Thousands of weapons, each one simple and cheap to manufacture, had been deployed throughout the sector. Nuclear mines, kinetic kill vehicles, antimatter warheads that Earth scientists had only recently figured out how to produce. None of them were sophisticated by galactic standards, but they were everywhere, hidden in asteroid fields and floating among regular space debris. Commander Yuna commanded one of the frigates assigned to defend Proxima. Her ship, the Indomitable, was barely 6 months old and had already seen 3 major engagements. The crew was exhausted. The ship's hull showed scars from previous battles, and they were low on almost every type of ammunition. But when Taeyang asked for volunteers to stay and fight, Yuna hadn't hesitated. She stood on her bridge watching the sensor displays as the Council fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel. Ship after ship appeared until the scanner couldn't accurately count them all. It was like watching an endless tide of death rolling toward them. "All ships, this is General Taeyang. Today we stand against the greatest military force the galaxy has ever seen. They think numbers and technology will win this battle. They think we'll break and run when we see how outmatched we are. They're wrong. Today we show them what humanity really means. Today we teach them that some positions cannot be taken, no matter how many ships you bring. Hold the line." The Council fleet advanced in perfect formation, confident in their superiority. They had learned from previous encounters and kept their shields at maximum power. They maintained proper spacing between ships to prevent chain reactions if one vessel was destroyed. They had point defense systems active to shoot down missiles and incoming projectiles. By every military standard, they were prepared. They weren't prepared for the scale of the trap. The first mines detonated when the leading edge of the fleet reached the outer defensive perimeter. Nuclear weapons hidden among asteroids exploded without warning. The Council ship's shields absorbed most of the damage, but the blast revealed the positions of thousands more hidden weapons. Evasive maneuvers. The Council commanders ordered their fleets to scatter, trying to avoid the minefield. But that was exactly what Taeyang wanted. When the neat formations broke apart, when ships began moving unpredictably to avoid mines, that's when the kinetic kill vehicles activated. These weapons had no engines, no guidance systems, no energy signatures to detect. They were simply dense metal projectiles that had been placed in carefully calculated orbits. When the Council ships changed course to avoid mines, they moved directly into the paths of these projectiles. Dozens of vessels took critical hits, their shields designed to stop energy weapons proving useless against solid matter traveling at extreme speeds. The Council fleet pushed forward through the killing field, taking losses but continuing their advance. They still outnumbered the defenders by 8-1. They could afford casualties. The objective was too important to retreat now. That's when the human ships attacked. Yuna led her squadron directly into the heart of the enemy fleet. The Indomitable was too damaged to survive a prolonged engagement, so she didn't try. Her ship and 5 others simply charged forward, firing every weapon they had, targeting enemy vessels at point-blank range where shields were weakest. The Council ships returned fire with overwhelming force. Yuna watched 2 of her squadron disappear in explosions. Another ship took a plasma bolt that sheared off half its hull, but they kept pushing forward, kept firing, kept making the enemy pay for every meter of space. A plasma shot hit the Indomitable's port side, destroying the engine controls. The ship began spinning wildly as momentum carried it forward. Yuna fought to regain some control, using maneuvering thrusters to stabilize the rotation. "Captain, we've lost main power. Life support is failing. Weapons are offline." Her first officer's voice was steady despite the chaos. Yuna checked her tactical display. The Indomitable was drifting into the middle of an enemy formation, dead in space but still intact. Around her, the battle raged on. She could see Proxima Station taking hits, its shields flashing as plasma fire hammered against them. She could see human ships fighting desperately against impossible odds. "All hands, this is the captain. Abandon ship. Everyone to the escape pods, now." "What about you, Captain?" her officer asked. Yuna looked at him and smiled. "Someone needs to stay and make sure the self-destruct activates properly. Get everyone out." "That's an order." The crew evacuated quickly, launching escape pods that scattered in all directions. Some would be picked up by human ships. Some would be captured by the Council. But they would live. That was what mattered. When the last pod was away, Yuna activated the self-destruct sequence. The ship's reactor would overload in 60 seconds, creating an explosion large enough to damage any vessel within a kilometer. She waited, counting down, watching as a Vryn cruiser moved closer to investigate the crippled human ship. The explosion was silent in the vacuum of space, but it was beautiful. The Indomitable and the Vryn cruiser disappeared in a flash of light that lit up the entire battlefield. Yuna and 200 Vryn soldiers died instantly, but her sacrifice created a gap in the enemy formation, a gap that 3 human destroyers immediately exploited. The Battle of Proxima Station lasted 8 hours. When it finally ended, the space around the station was filled with debris from both sides. The Council fleet had achieved its objective. Proxima Station was destroyed, its structure torn apart by sustained bombardment. 40,000 human soldiers and support personnel were dead. But the cost had been catastrophic for the Council. Of the 800 ships that attacked, only 400 limped away. Some were barely functional, held together by emergency repairs and prayers. Casualty figures for the Council forces exceeded 200,000. Both sides claimed victory. The Council said they had eliminated humanity's main military base. Humanity said they had proven that even overwhelming force couldn't break them. But the real result of the battle was something neither side had expected. It showed everyone in the galaxy that this war might not have a winner. President Minji reviewed the casualty reports from Proxima, her face showing no emotion. 40,000 dead in a single battle. It was more than humanity had lost in any conflict in the last century. But she couldn't afford to show weakness, not now. "How many Council ships did we destroy?" she asked. "Confirmed kills number 372. Another 100 or so are damaged badly enough that they'll be out of action for months." Minji nodded. "And our production capacity?" "Shipyards are operating at maximum output. We're replacing losses faster than the Council expected. The new designs using captured alien technology are showing promising results." Then we continue. "For every soldier we lost at Proxima, for every civilian killed in this war, we make them pay 10 times over. Send the word to all commands. No mercy, no surrender. We fight until we win or until there's nothing left to fight with." Far away in the Galactic Council chambers, a very different conversation was taking place. Thexal watched the casualty reports with growing horror. The Council had won the battle but lost half their attacking force. 4 member species were now openly calling for peace negotiations. Public opinion across Council space was turning against the war. The Vryn representative tried to maintain confidence. "We achieved our objective. The human military base is destroyed. They cannot sustain losses like they took at Proxima. Thexal looked at him with something approaching pity. Neither can we. We lost 400 ships. Do you understand what that means? We've lost more vessels in 8 months of fighting than we've lost in the previous 1,000 years combined. Our economy is straining to replace them. Our populations are growing tired of endless casualty reports, and the humans show no sign of weakening. They're primitives, the Vryn representative insisted. They cannot possibly stand against the combined might of the Council. They already are, Thexal said quietly. And I'm beginning to wonder if we made a terrible mistake, but it was too late for doubts. The Vryn Empire, facing political collapse at home, was preparing one final gambit. If they couldn't defeat humanity through conventional means, they would strike at the source. They would attack Earth itself. The warning came from an unexpected source. A council species that had withdrawn from the war sent an encrypted message directly to Earth. The Vryn Empire was gathering every remaining warship they had for one final assault. The target was Earth itself. If they could destroy humanity's homeworld, the war would be over. It was a desperate gamble, but the Vryn had nothing left to lose. President Minji received the intelligence report with grim acceptance. She had known this moment would come eventually. The Council had tried to defeat humanity through limited warfare, through tactical strikes, through economic pressure. Nothing had worked. So now they would try overwhelming force directed at Earth's heart. How long do we have? She asked General Taiyang. 4 days, maybe 5. They're gathering at a staging point about 3 light years away. Intelligence estimates they have between 250 and 300 ships. And our defensive forces? Every ship we can pull back to Earth will be there. Maybe 120 vessels plus orbital defenses and the weapon. Minji nodded. For the past year, human scientists had been working on a secret project. They had studied captured Vryn technology, analyzed their weapons and shields, and looked for weaknesses. And they had found one. The Council species had become so reliant on energy weapons that their defensive systems were optimized for that specific threat. They could handle plasma, lasers, and particle beams with ease. But there was one type of weapon they had forgotten about: kinetic energy. Earth's moon had been turned into the largest weapon humanity had ever built. Deep inside its structure, engineers had constructed a massive railgun that used electromagnetic forces to accelerate projectiles to a significant fraction of light speed. The projectiles themselves were simple, just dense metal slugs weighing several tons each. But when they hit a target at relativistic speeds, shields designed for energy weapons were useless. The weapon had never been tested at full power. There were concerns about structural damage to the moon itself. But if the Vryn fleet reached Earth, none of that would matter. Pilot Dong-Yun sat in his fighter's cockpit running through pre-flight checks. He had been flying combat missions for 8 months now, ever since his wife and daughter were killed in the war's first attack. He had survived 12 major engagements, shot down 6 enemy ships, and earned a reputation as one of humanity's best pilots. But he knew his luck was running out. Every mission, the odds caught up with more pilots. Friends he had trained with were gone. Squadron mates he had fought beside were dead. And now the biggest battle of the war was coming, and he would be right in the middle of it. A message came through on his personal channel. It was from his squadron commander. Dong-Yun, I'm putting you in charge of Alpha Wing. Your mission is to hit the enemy formation center and draw as much fire as possible. It's a one-way trip. I won't order you to take it. I'm asking for volunteers. Dong-Yun didn't hesitate. I volunteer. So does the rest of Alpha Wing. He switched to the squadron channel. Alpha Wing, this is Lead. We've been given a special mission. No one's expecting us to come back from this one. Anyone who wants to transfer out, do it now. No shame in it. Nobody transferred. All 12 pilots in Alpha Wing confirmed they were ready. The Vryn fleet entered Earth's solar system in force. 300 ships, representing everything the Vryn Empire could field. They had stripped defenses from their own worlds to gather this many vessels. It was everything they had left, committed to one final battle. The human defensive fleet met them at the orbit of Jupiter. 120 ships against 300. The odds were worse than Proxima Station, but there was no option to retreat. Behind them was Earth. Everything humanity had ever known. Everyone they loved, their entire history. They would hold this line or die trying. The battle began with the Vryn fleet firing everything they had, space filled with plasma and missiles. Human ships dodged and weaved, returning fire when they could, focusing on survival. The defensive plan was simple. Hold on long enough for the moon weapon to charge up and fire. Every minute mattered. Every second counted. Donghyun led Alpha Wing straight into the center of the enemy formation. His fighter and the 11 ships following him were loaded with missiles and determination. They fired as they flew, targeting sensors and weapon systems, trying to create chaos in the enemy ranks. The Vryn responded exactly as hoped, focusing massive firepower on the 12 fighters. 5 ships disappeared in the first 30 seconds. 3 more were hit and tumbled out of control. Dongyun's fighter took a glancing blow that destroyed his left wing stabilizer, but he kept flying, kept firing, kept drawing enemy attention. His communication system was still working. He could hear the chatter from the main battle. Human ships were dying, but they were taking Vryn vessels with them. The orbital defenses around Earth were engaging targets that pushed through the defensive line, and somewhere behind all the chaos the moon weapon was charging. Alpha Wing, press forward. Make them look at us, Donghyun ordered. His remaining pilots acknowledged and pushed deeper into the enemy fleet. The Vryn formations broke apart trying to target the human fighters, ships moving out of optimal positions to get clear shots. Donghyun's fighter took another hit, his cockpit filled with smoke and warning alarms. Life support was failing. Engines were running at 30% power. He was dead. He just hadn't stopped moving yet. He activated his communication system one last time, broadcasting on all frequencies. This is for everyone we've lost. This is for Earth. And this is for showing the galaxy what humans do when you threaten our home. He pointed his dying fighter at the largest Vryn ship he could see and pushed the throttle to maximum. The fighter accelerated despite the damage, momentum carrying it forward. The Vryn ship fired, trying to destroy the incoming fighter, but Donghyun was already committed. Impact was inevitable. The fighter hit the Vryn cruiser at full speed. The explosion was tiny compared to the massive battle happening around it. But it was enough. One more enemy ship damaged. One more target that couldn't fight at full capacity. President Minji watched from the command center as the battle reached its critical moment. Human casualties were mounting. The defensive fleet was down to 60 operational ships. The Vryn were pushing toward Earth, getting closer with each passing minute. How long until the weapon is ready? She asked. 30 seconds, Madam President. The longest 30 seconds of Minji's life passed in silence. Around her, people watched displays showing the battle. Every human ship was fighting desperately, buying time with their lives. Weapon charged and ready to fire, the operator announced. Fire, Minji said simply. Deep inside Earth's moon, magnetic coils that had taken a year to build activated in sequence. The massive railgun fired, launching a metal projectile at speeds that conventional sensors could barely detect. The slug crossed the distance between the moon and the Vryn fleet in seconds. The Vryn ships never saw it coming. Their sensors were designed to detect energy signatures and incoming missiles. A solid projectile moving at relativistic speeds was effectively invisible until impact. When the slug hit the lead Vryn battleship, it passed completely through the vessel, the kinetic energy creating a catastrophic chain reaction that tore the ship apart. But one shot wasn't enough. The weapons targeting systems tracked the Vryn fleet and fired again, and again. Each shot took 30 seconds to charge and fire. Each shot destroyed or disabled an enemy vessel. The shields that had protected the Vryn throughout the war were useless against simple kinetic force delivered at impossible speeds. Panic spread through the Vryn fleet. They couldn't defend against this weapon. They couldn't even see the shots coming until it was too late. Ships began breaking formation trying to retreat, but the moon weapon continued firing. After 10 shots, half the Vryn fleet was destroyed or disabled. The survivors abandoned the assault and jumped to faster than light speed, retreating in disorder. The Battle of Earth was over. The human defensive fleet, reduced to 40 operational ships, regrouped near Earth. The cost had been terrible. 80 ships destroyed, thousands of pilots and crew dead, but Earth still stood. The Vryn had thrown everything they had at humanity's homeworld and failed. Within days, the Vryn Empire collapsed. Their military was destroyed, their economy was in ruins, and their population rose up in rebellion against the leadership that had led them to disaster. Regional governors declared independence. The empire fractured into a dozen smaller states. The Galactic Council, facing economic collapse and political unrest across member species, formally sued for peace. Thexel himself traveled to Earth to negotiate the terms. He stood before President Minji in a simple meeting room. his crystalline form seeming diminished somehow. "We were wrong," he said simply. "We underestimated your species. We thought technology and military might would be enough. We didn't understand what we were really fighting." "And what were you fighting?" Minji asked. "Survivors. Humans have been surviving impossible situations for your entire existence. You've built your entire civilization around the concept of never giving up. We should have seen that. We should have offered friendship instead of subjugation." The peace treaty was signed 3 weeks later. The Council recognized Earth's complete sovereignty. They paid reparations for the 5,000 civilians killed in the war's first attack and for all the colonies that had been destroyed. They guaranteed that no Council species would ever again attempt to dominate or control humanity. In return, humanity agreed to join the Galactic Council as a full member with equal voting rights. They also agreed to share some of their technology, including the kinetic weapon systems that had proven so effective. The war had lasted 14 months. Human casualties exceeded 3 million military and civilian dead. 22 colonies had been damaged or destroyed. The economic cost was staggering. But humanity had survived, and in surviving, they had changed the galaxy forever. 5 years after the war ended, a new species made contact with the Galactic Council. They were technologically advanced, militarily powerful, and confident in their superiority. They requested membership and made it clear they expected to be treated as important additions to the Council's power structure. Thexal, still serving as Council leader, met with their representatives. He listened to their demands and watched them display their technology. Then he showed them something. He brought up footage from the war. Human ships ramming Vryn vessels, civilian fighters making suicide runs against enemy cruisers, cities being rebuilt even as bombs fell, and the final battle at Earth, where humanity nearly destroyed its own moon to create a weapon. "You are welcome to join us," Thexal said, "and I hope you will bring wisdom and strength to our community. But there is something you need to understand about the galaxy you're entering. There is a species here called humanity. They are relatively young, technologically developing, and emotionally driven. They will frustrate you with their illogical decisions. They will confuse you with their stubborn refusal to accept reality. They will do things that no rational being would consider." He paused, letting the footage play. Images of Dongyun's final charge. Yuna activating her self-destruct. Jisoo defending her colony with improvised explosives. Thousands of human pilots making one-way trips to take out enemy ships. And if you ever threaten them, they will absolutely destroy you. They are the most deadly species in the galaxy, not because they are the strongest, but because they simply do not know how to give up. They will fight with ships, with guns, with rocks and sticks if necessary. They will turn anything into a weapon. They will sacrifice everything to protect what they love. So I suggest you treat them with the respect they have earned. The new species watched the footage in silence. Finally, their representative spoke. "We will remember this lesson." "Good," Thexal said. "Because the galaxy learned it the hard way and we paid for that education with millions of lives. The humans were right about one thing from the very beginning. You can offer them friendship, and they will be loyal allies for life. But if you force them to make a fist, you will absolutely regret it. Humanity took its place among the stars not as conquerors or subjugated people, but as equals who had earned their position through blood and determination. They brought their chaos, their creativity, and their stubborn refusal to accept defeat. And the galaxy, having learned what humans were truly capable of, treated them with the cautious respect given to predators. Because in the end, the Council had learned the most important lesson about humanity. They weren't the biggest, the strongest, or the most advanced species. But they were survivors, and survivors are always the most dangerous opponents you can face.